Speedrunning in video games conjures up images of frenetic sprints and glitchy hacks to go as fast as possible while skipping as much as possible. But just because a game was built for speedrunning doesn't mean you can't stop. Smell the roses. Lorne's Lure is a first-person exploration game. Even though it looks like a retro FPS, you don't fight. You just run and jump and climb and parkour your way through gobsmackingly massive structures. You can do this really fast if you want to. In fact, the game is made for speedrunning, with built-in timers for per level and full game runs. But it's also made for players like me, who will never do a speedrun. In Lorne's Lure, you're an android following a mysterious glitchy ghost through gigantic burnt-out cities and dark, cavernous sewers. These environments are astonishing and oppressive, and again, absolutely massive. Even as you gain more abilities to navigate with, like double jumps and rock climbing hooks and air dashes, you still often feel like a tiny little bug crawling along structures that were not made for you. And that's the trick.
I was in like an underground parking garage, and then I noticed some of piping, like complex piping on the ceiling.
That's the voice of Rubeki, the singular developer behind Lorne's Lure, who generously agreed to speak to me in spite of suffering from a bad cold.
I wondered what would it be like to be jumping around that, right? It's not like a path designed for humans, but it would be interesting because it's like very intricate. What kind of tools would you need to traverse something like that? What would it be like to be a micro thing inside of that? So I'd look at pictures of engines or vehicles, infrastructure, this kind of stuff, and imagine what it would be like to be something tiny inside of that.
And it turns out, it feels awe-inspiring, but also dangerous. A place you shouldn't be able to traverse because it was never designed for you to climb around. Which is also why it feels so much like a game for speedrunning, because it often feels like you're going out of bounds.
Whenever I played games when I was much younger, I would always try to go out of bounds, and I always found that fun. There was a particular game called Enter the Matrix, which was very broken. You could easily go out of bounds, and I found that really fun. Like, you could stand on the edge of like a flat plane. Beyond it wouldn't render, and then on the left you see the actual level. And I would love just to try to get to these places, and then just that trial and error of getting somewhere that like you were not supposed to be. I like that feeling because it feels like you're truly discovering something new.
This style of whatever it takes navigation contrasts with a controversial trend in modern game design. The condescending yellow paint that tells you exactly what you can and cannot climb on. You can see this all over a game that partially inspired Lorne's Lure, the first-person parkour game Mirror's Edge, which, if it were released today, would probably be criticized for using gallons and gallons of yellow paint to hold your hand through its environments. Although, I guess it'd be red paint instead of yellow because its skies were red, but that's besides the point. Also, I don't think this would be a valid criticism of Mirror's Edge. It was an incredible game in its own right. That's not the point I'm making. These days, yellow paint has become a sort of catch-all critique for any game that uses too much signposting to guide players through its levels, highlighting exactly what players are allowed to climb or which doors they can go through. As a design element, yellow paint exists on a spectrum from important accessibility aid to obnoxious handholding. It's a legitimate grievance, but sometimes people are huge jerks about it. But this is what most contrasts Lorne's Lure with other recent made-for-speedrunning first-person platformers like Neon White and Ghost Runner. They don't splash a bunch of yellow paint everywhere, but they do expect a certain level of rapid pattern recognition, like memorizing the quickest way to defeat certain enemies, and knowing the telltale environmental cues for which parts of the game world are actually traversable. But in Lorne's Lure's bizarre macro environments, sometimes you just gotta slow down, observe the environment, and then jump to your death. A couple times. Or 100.
Well, the idea of the megastructure is that it is brutal, and obviously there's large heights and very narrow platforms and whatnot. So if you make a mistake, it's punished with death.
Don't worry, you respawn almost instantly, just a few platforms from where you fell. Oh, and it's not really dying, but a new simulation, so it's not too existentially terrifying if you think about it.
But in terms of the trial and error, that was sort of built in from the start with the failed simulations and the quick retries. And the reason I add this is because I've actually done parkour in real life, and this is how it is.
Rubecki pointed out that the process of doing parkour is the trial and error of figuring out the jump map that gets you through a location.
Often you see on YouTube very smooth single takes, continuous, and it looks, wow, these guys are crazy, they're amazing. But that's not how it is.
The slick, professional parkour runs that you can watch on YouTube are essentially the speed runs of these locations. That single, flawless run born out of hours, maybe even days of practice. Which, to make an obvious point, is also what speedrunners do. Like, they both have wall hacks, they're going out of bounds.
So you just keep doing that one jump. You get to a point where you're like super tired, then you take like a 5-minute break, and you're like, okay, fine, one more time before I go. And then you get it, and then it feels great.
It's also not the case that Lorne's Lure wants the player to get lost. While the game doesn't have yellow paint, it does have a bright glowing purple beacon that the player can call upon at any time to point them in the right direction. But since it's rarely a direct path to the beacon, it still puts the onus on the player to observe their environment, practice a few jumps, and eventually move forward. And that's where another real-life inspiration comes in, because moving forward in this game doesn't always mean looking like a graceful parkourist.
Like if you've ever tried rock climbing, like there are like intended paths and like the best way to move your body in order to properly go up. But sometimes when you watch somebody struggle with a new wall, they'll do some janky movements to get up to the next hold. You can't say it's illegal. It's not it's against the rules. They got up.
I had a great time getting to places in Lorne's Lure that it felt like I shouldn't, doubly so when I did it in a way that it also felt like I shouldn't. It was like I was getting away with something.
So I treated it the same way. If you can get past, okay, fine, it looks a little jank, but you use physics in the game, so that's fine.
And because sometimes the places you're going to in these levels feels kinda illegal, you feel even smarter about figuring out that path. For example, these slanted elements should be a problem for you since you slide right off them. But you'll also notice that you recharge the stamina you need for jumps and air dashes on these inclines, meaning you can string together an obnoxious number of them in order to get somewhere it feels like the developer didn't want you to go. But it's actually a trick that Rubecki played on you. He wants you to go there.
It's just anything goes. And then the idea is you have the tools to get through that, but it might not always feel like it was designed specifically for traversal.
This game loop, combined with these gigantic levels, makes Lorne's Lure somehow feel like both a speedrunning game, but also the most acrobatic walking simulator ever made. It feels downright relaxing at times, just climbing, or wall running. One level honestly feels like a spa. That's why it ultimately didn't surprise me that Rubecki themselves is more of a speedrun observer than a speedrunner.
I just enjoy speedrunning as a practice. I wanted to make something that I could also watch other people speedrun just for my own entertainment. I can't do it myself, not at that level. But Mario 64, obviously a classic. I love watching Mario 64 runs. They're just mind-boggling how somebody can sit through hours, do it like flawlessly, and like beat records with an N64 controller of all things.
Mario 64, like most games, wasn't designed with speedrunning in mind, but you'll find few games as popular in the speedrunning community. I highly recommend checking out Summoning Cells documentaries to learn more. Lorne's Lure, on the other hand, is designed with speedrunning in mind, so if that's your thing, get on it. Both of us want to watch your runs. But if you're like me and you like narrative-driven exploration games without a hint of combat, you might be surprised by how much Lorne's Lure feels like it's made just for you. And I don't think you'll miss the yellow paint.